What's up, guys? Gonna do a little story time here today. Stay tuned. So, little story on my life. Growing up, there was myself, and then I had three sisters, all whom are older than me. I was the baby of the family. And growing up, I had, pretty decent childhood. You have your, with your sisters, you have your arguments and, um, kid stuff. And, my three sisters would always say, well, you were spoiled. Mom spoiled you so much. And I never thought that until recently. I'm sitting back and I'm reflecting back on those days of what I could remember, and I think my mom did. She actually spoiled me. Um, but I had three sisters whom I love dearly. I still have my three sisters and well, myself, and then my mom is still alive today. I had a stepdad who he died back in 1991. He died on Christmas Day, and whom I miss dearly. I miss him a lot because he was the one that he was that father figure that I didn't have. So, growing up, I was, your normal teenager. You go through your elementary school, and now you're into your teen years, and um, I found myself around the age of, I think it was 15, 16 years old. Um, First, I have to say that I always had a love for music. Okay, I've always had a love for music. I could actually listen to a song and I could play it, or get there somehow. I would be able to eventually play that song, whether it be on guitar or drums. And I found myself at 15 years old getting involved with a rock band. It was actually a top 40 dance rock band. It was called XL. X, and then there's an L. XL. And man, I got to tell you what, man, I go back on those times. It was, man, I had the greatest times of my life back in those days. We'd go and we'd play in clubs, and they were playing like the most, the most, it was like a top 40 dance rock band, and they were playing a lot of the stuff that was in, like back in them days. It was ZZ Top, Billy Idol, Prince, just all kinds of stuff back in the 80s. I mean, it was awesome. I loved it. I had such a great time with these guys. And, it was different than how it was for other teenage kids. Other teenage kids were kind of doing their thing, whether you be into sports or just going somewhere and just hanging out with your friends. For me, it was different. We were getting ready, getting geared up to go to a club to go play. So at that age, at the age of 15 into 16, 17, now 18, 19, into my 20s, here I am still rocking with this band. And yeah, it was different, man. You got to see a whole difference. At that age, you don't normally get to see what it's like in clubs, but I did. And the owners of these clubs had the understanding that we were underage, but we were part of the crew, and we had to be there. My job went from just setting up the stage, okay? And then it went from that to where I was a drum technician. I started practicing on playing drums and learning to do the drums. And then I would set them up, and then I would sound check them. It went from XL to Now going into a more professional band, which was called Bashful. Bashful was a very, very popular band, very popular metal band. They had a couple of their own albums out, and they got a lot of radio play back in the days. And it was crazy because you went from the top 40 dance rock band to now you're going into the metal scene, and it wasn't like heavy metal thrash type music. It wasn't like that. It was more on like they had their own music, but yet they did some AC/DC stuff. So whatever. They did some Crocus, things like that, and that took it to a whole different level. It was more on a professional level, as I would say, because we played with some national acts at that time, and um, I got some experience, some exposure behind the scenes of what that was like for professional bands, and setting up on stage, and working with different road crews that toured the country, basically, that had a record label. There was bands like Vixen. We opened up for Vixen. It's an all-girl group. I don't know if y'all ever heard of them, but check them out. There was a band called Electric Boys, who back in the 80s, they had a big hit on the radio called Lips and Hips. Then there was Dirty Looks. Dirty Looks was an excellent band. They had such a awesome sound. Uh, they had a very popular song that hit the radio. It was called "Coal for the Wire," and they had Dirty Looks had more of a. It was like a AC/DC type sound. Vixen. Vixen was on MTV. They had their own music hits. They had, like one of their hits was, what was the name of it? Edge of a Broken Heart. Check it out. Back in the day, that's what was popular. In fact, Vixen is still going today. And then it wasn't until I got into my mid 20s, like late 20s maybe, when things just slowly started to taper off, and I noticed that the bands were, the band was kind of gearing towards more on a family type thing. There was, anytime you're in rock and roll and you're married and you're on the road and you're going to have issues. I guarantee it. It's not for those that are married, unless you work things out. So the band broke up. I would say back in the early to mid 90s is about around the time that it ended for me. That was no longer part of my lifestyle. I went on and moved on to other things, focusing more on my career, working just a regular steady job every day. And then up to this point, here I am, married to a beautiful wife who is from the Philippines, and never ever thought that I'd find myself on the other side of the world bringing back a beautiful woman to be part of my life. So a lot of what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter what kind of life you've lived. Basically, you choose the kind of life that you live. Back in that day, it's what I was into. I was into rock and roll. I was into the band scene. Did I ever want to start my own band? Sure. That was something that I always dreamed of. Who wouldn't want to be, think about that. You're popular. You're up on stage. You're doing your thing, and everybody knows your music. They know your songs. What a feeling. What an awesome feeling. And I've seen some pretty awesome stuff in the years back in those days, where the people know your music, and it just sends chills down your spine, knowing that this many people know your music and they're singing your music. So it was pretty awesome time for me. Do I miss it? Sure do. I miss all that. And that was just some of the stuff that I did growing up. Now I am, more on a professional level with my career, and I have more settled down. I have my wife, and we're just the happiest people on earth. I love her to death, and just getting out and doing things with her now is what sets me off. Just getting out, doing different things, whether it just be go for a walk on the trails or going and checking out different areas, that places that we've never seen before. So, as far as my childhood, I think I had a pretty good childhood. Had a pretty good upbringing. My mom, God bless her, she's still with us today. She's getting up there in her age, and I feel guilty sometimes because I don't spend enough time with my mom. She lives a little bit of a distance from where I live, and it's not that easy for me to get over there to see her as much as I'd like to. But I guess, where am I going with the story? I think I love hearing about people's, like, especially older people. I love just sitting there and just listening to what they did when they were kids. Seeing old pictures, things like that. I mean, I just think it's interesting, to know that, this is what we did when we were kids. And even back in the day, back in the 80s, what was big for us teenagers was we'd go to the malls. The mall was like the place to go, man. You went to the mall and you'd cruise around the mall in your hot rod, your hot looking car, trying to pick up chicks. You know what I mean? That's what was in. We'd go into the mall, walk around in the mall. Today, there's still teenagers going to the mall, but it's a whole different generation today than what it used to be. It's what's to be expected, I guess. I think the 80s generation was the best. I think some of the best music came out in the 80s, and I am sure glad that I grew up in the 80s because I think it's awesome. What other things? That's about it. I just wanted to reflect a little bit on my life. Go back and I got my mom. My mom, we should be celebrating the life of our mother every day for what they have done for us. You know what I mean? My mom, she had four of us. She was, at the time when my biological dad had left when I was a baby, she did it on her own. And that's tough. That's got to be tough. This is back in the 60s into the 70s. That had to have been really, really difficult. And it's still difficult today. But I celebrate my mom. I want to celebrate her and to thank my mom as much as I possibly can for what she has done for me. I think, talk about difficult times. I can only imagine. I can only imagine what that is like. But I'm going into different things. You guys know when I talk, I start talking about all kinds of different stuff. But I just think it's awesome to hear about people, to hear about what they did when they grew up, what it was like. Let's say you have an older person, that was growing up into the 40s, into the 50s, what it was like. I've talked to some staff members that are now retired, but they said back in the day, in the 50s, it was like you had the slick hair, but you had the ducktail. Back in the 50s, that's what was in. I think it's interesting to hear that stuff. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Just wanted to sit down here and just get some of this hot air out of my body, and hope you guys can share a little bit of some of your stories. I'm interested to hear some other things I have coming up. I want to talk later about what I may be trying to do with my channel. And you know, as your channel grows, you have to grow. And so one of the things that I'm on a personal level for me is I'm trying to get healthy. I'm trying to get more healthy. I've had my heart surgery, everything's looking good, but I got to now do my part. I got to do my part. You see, I got to get some of the weight off. And I just had 2 doctor's appointments and they went very well. The only thing they told me is you got to work on the weight. And it's not that I eat a lot of food, it's just that my body doesn't produce enough insulin to keep the calories burning. So it's harder for me. And that's not an excuse, that's a fact. That's why I have to do insulin, because my body's not producing it. So I might be bringing you guys with me on this exercise journey. I don't know if I've been thinking about it. Let me know what you think. I don't know if I want to go there with it, but I do need to make some changes with my channel. And I will be sharing that with you guys here very soon. So until then, keep it real, y'all. Keep it all real and love the ones that you're with. And I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.